Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. We are back and kicking off a 9th season of the Sample Chapter Podcast, this time coming to you with episode 292 and a new friend of the show, J.C. Ventimiglia. Hey, it's a great conversation. Somebody that I've known for quite a while, but never really knew either. I guess I should say I've written with him a few times over the years, but this is the first time I've got to sit down and find out more about him. And you're going to get to learn about Jack along with me. We're going to be talking about some of his older work, his background as a journalist and newspaper editor. We're talking about his love of fantasy as an escape from that world as a journalist. We get to hear a little bit about his knack for putting real world issues inside the story and what's next for Jack, given his other love, which is that of historical stories. And he goes in depth telling us of what he's working on right now. Like I said, it's a great conversation, one I think you're going to really enjoy, and I'm not going to waste too much time right now. But we'll talk more next week. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and get on over to that interview with J.C. Ventimiglia. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Hey, welcome back. Hey, this week I'm pretty thrilled actually because I love getting the opportunity to introduce to you writers, authors from my local writing group, and this week's guest is somebody who has a world of experience prior to me ever even knowing him. And funny story is I knew him before I knew him, but we'll get into that later on. This week's guest is J.C. Ventimiglia. Jack's background includes high school dropout, carnival worker in Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Mississippi, and Alabama, a Mississippi river barge hand, natural gas roughneck in Oklahoma, a newspaper career in Illinois, Missouri, and Kansas, a National Writing Awards winner, a Missouri Press Association Hall of Famer, and a House proclamation in deep gratitude for public service. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome this jack of all trades, as it were, to the show, J.C. Ventimiglia. Hey, Jack, welcome to the show, buddy.
Welcome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. I like to refer to myself as a jack of all trades, but a master of one, which would be journalism. And it's also pretty obvious that it was hard for me to hold a job based on that introduction.
That's all right. I like to say prior to my current job, I was the world's best assistant manager, which ironically I'm an assistant manager now, but I've held it longer than ever before. Yeah, your career in journalism is actually you've got one of those names that stand out. So I remember reading in the paper all the time and seeing your name pop up, and I'd read your articles and stuff. And so like years later, whenever I got to meet you in the writing group, I was like, gosh, his name sounds so familiar. And yep, there you go. That's who it was. Like, hey, I knew him without knowing him.
So were you reading the newspapers here in Warrensburg or in other cities?
I want to say it was here in Warrensburg that you had an article pop up occasionally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Pretty often.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I think I've written, and I calculated this out once, and it was like over 9,000 articles.
Okay, so an occasional writer.
Gotcha. Exactly.
Yeah, when we first moved back to Missouri after getting out of the military, that was like one of the first things I did was like, you know what, let's sign up for the paper. And I think the paper was coming every day when we first came. And that was 15 years ago, 16 almost now.
Right. And that was when the paper was a daily.
Yeah. And I thought, well, that'd be a good way to help get myself reacclimated to Warrensburg and the area and kind of see what's going on in this community that we want to make home. So yeah, your name would pop up a lot. And
well, respect for your community involvement. I mean, coming out of the Air Force and then saying, hey, I'm going to get involved in my community. Once again, community service comes up first as a military person and now as a civilian. So way to go.
There you go. Yeah. Well, and I tell you what, it was the paper that's how I found out about the writing club. So I've told the story years ago, but I literally one day I wake up when I found out I was going to be a grandpa,
And I was like, man, that my life is not where I wanted it to be. I'm supposed to be a prolific and established writer by now, hopefully with a writing career. And I'm about to be a grandpa, and none of that has started. So I got serious about writing, and I thought, man, maybe I need to reach out. And I gotta figure out, what else I can do to grow that. And literally, like either that afternoon or the next day in the paper, there was an ad that Goldie had posted for the Writers of Warrensburg, taking place at oh, what was it, Hastings? The old
Oh man, I miss Hastings. Yeah, this is a
I do
great
too,
story.
yeah. And it was taking place the next evening. So I told my wife, I was like, all right, I got a sign from the newspaper that the Writers Club's meeting. And I think there was like 3 or 4 of us that met that night. And that was, oh my gosh, 2015. So it's been a while. Been a long road since. But yeah, newspaper again. I miss the days of daily newspaper.
Yeah, so do I.
So how did you get into, like, what was your call to writing? Was it something you always were driven to, something you always wanted to do, or was it just kind of a hobby that turned into a job?
I don't even know where to begin with that. I guess I guess people tend to gravitate toward what they're good at. And because I got encouragement, I was fooled into believing I was pretty good at writing. When I was in high school, I had a teacher say, uh, I had to do a short story for his class, and he wrote it. He said something that sounded good, sort of. He said, "This is a really good story, but you know that, and you're too good to coddle." I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, thanks. And boy, it felt like a backhanded compliment because he did not proceed to give me any further encouragement ever. It's like, man, had I been not a 14 or 15-year-old kid at that time, I might have said, well, what would you recommend? But because I had no idea what to do. I was just kind of gobsmacked. So, but that
Yeah.
did encouragement. And I had some other teachers who did the same thing. And teachers, of course, are what make a lot of people, uh, for good or ill,
Yeah.
uh, become what they become.
Yeah, I agree completely. And we have something in common with that, because that was kind of my whatever you want to call that, the superhero story, or the background was that I just was kind of encouraged a lot growing up, but never really took it that seriously until my moment of being a grandpa. And
Huh.
my wife was encouraging me. But yeah, same thing. I had a story in high school that I wrote for an assignment, and it was one of those moments where the story took new life as I was writing it, and it was my first time just kind of losing myself in the story. And it was supposed to be a 500 page or 500 word short thing, and I think I turned in about 5 or 6 thousand words, and it was, I don't know how many pages. And the teacher just laughed and was like, "Well, you did the assignment and then some." And like, but this is she enjoyed it and encouraged me to keep trying something like that. And
Sometimes
that
it's
was,
a case of you start writing the story and the story ends up writing you.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
It
And
takes
yeah,
you
that
away.
encouragement, yeah, and that encouragement just really stuck with me over the years. And other people once in a while saying like, "Oh, you sound like," things I would notice, like a sunset, and oh yeah, there's ducks flying over, and I'm having this moment with my coffee, and people talking about like, "Hey, you sound like a writer. Yeah, you ought to do things like that." And then eventually I was like, "Yeah, I really would like to do that." Then my wife was the one who finally pushed me over the limit. But uh, yeah, so that's cool then to find out that we have something in common with that. And
Well, actually, I wanted to go into art. That's where I was
no
headed in
kidding.
college. I was working on an art degree,
Wow.
and that's when I found out I was colorblind. And I was told that becoming a colorblind artist was akin to being a tone deaf musician. It probably wasn't going to work. So I went into I went into journalism instead. Now I also read a lot, like everybody. I guess in those days, I'm not sure people read as much as they used to. But The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, of course, and because fantasy is something I'm interested in, but also the real classics like the Iliad and the Odyssey. I read those as a kid, can't say I understood them very well. I just reread the Odyssey, a new version of it. It was bizarre, I think. The version I read, and Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Divine Comedy. So I read those, but then I guess those gave me a really solid background for when I read things like The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And those kinds of experiences with those books made me want to do the same thing. But you know what they say, don't quit your day job.
Yeah.
with a wife and a kid. I embarked on 42 years in journalism, is where I went, and writing off and on. I wrote for magazines and some other things, but um, mainly I stuck with journalism because I had to pay the bills like everybody else. But now that I'm retired, I feel like I've got a little more leeway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So during that all that time, then you most of your writing then was just targeted at what can you sell? What's going to bring in a paycheck? It wasn't a whole lot of writing for you, putting aside like, oh, I'm going to write that American novel, and it's going to save me and get me out of this daily grind.
No, I never ever thought that. I did do personal writing. I did work on some books and short stories. While I was still a journalist, I wrote I wrote Jesse James in the County of Clay. That was a historical history-based book. I wrote that while I was in Liberty, Missouri, working as the editor for that group of newspapers. And that book is primarily a timeline of Jesse James' life and a guidebook to the James farm in Kearney. So that served a purpose. And, I was happy we did a printing of 2000 and we sold out.
Wow.
So, I've thought a few times about going back and redoing it, but I've got other projects. But that's one I would like to redo. And then I've written for a couple of anthologies. I wrote a chapter for Liberty for All, celebrating 175 years in Liberty, Missouri. And then, as you mentioned, the short story anthologies, Hawthorne Creek and Mystic Springs. I wrote for those too.
Yeah. Yeah, and those were nice stories. I remember the Hawthorne Creek, the superintendent, and
Right.
I believe it was the Silk Man in our
Silkman,
most
yes.
recent one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
And
liked Silkman.
that was good. I like that too. It was mysterious, and I think it really got me into, okay, this guy, he's not just a journalist, he's got stories to tell. And I really enjoyed Silkman. That was a good story.
Well, thank you.
And I'm looking forward to, I mean, I guess we can announce to the world here, the two of us, that we're working on a new anthology that hopefully our stories get picked, but I think we have a good chance, good shot at it with some little, what would you call that? PG-13 horror for the new anthology.
Well, mine is I can't talk about yours.
I'm keeping it PG-13.
Yeah, and I regarding horror, it's not my strongest suit, but at the same time, I know what I like and what I don't like. What I don't like in things that are called horror is it's just gross. It's just gore, and I don't want to see gore. I want
Yeah.
if you've got something that can hold my attention and keep me on the edge of my seat, frighten me, they'll throw a maggoty skull in my face. I just don't want
Yeah.
to see that. But do something that's really going to hold you on the edge of your seat. That's the kind of thing I like.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. So I'm okay with, as Goldie likes to say, I'm okay with it happening behind the closed door.
Yeah,
It's like, oh,
exactly.
it's like you know what's happening, but you don't
I
have
know
to see it.
I know there's an audience for that, but that's not what I want to appeal to.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, so your most recent book here, Wizard War: The Rise of the Elf Twins, that was a lot of fun, and something I did not. I guess because I haven't been able to come to the meetings as frequently as I used to. So this kind of hit me out of left field. I was like, "Whoa, this is from Jack," and this was a lot of fun, man. I mean, I guess as you were saying before, you have a history of really enjoying Lord of the Rings and other stuff. So maybe this shouldn't have surprised me as much, but since we haven't really gotten to know each other prior to today, this was a surprise. Tell me a little bit about the background for Wizard War.
Well, like you said, I've written or I've read several fantasy books, and I've always liked fantasy, especially after 4 decades in journalism. I mean, the kinds of stories I wrote aren't the kinds that you would expect for most small town newspaper editors. Um, I have, one time I had 17 newspapers under my control as the editor. Even though I was editor, I was still out in the field. And what I was doing as I was covering murders. I've interviewed murderers. I've been to horrific accident scenes. Um, that's not the kind of stuff that really makes for a good night's sleep. Writing about fantasy was a way of getting that kind of garbage out of my head. And so when you say it was fun, et cetera, well, I appreciate that because that's what I was going for, a nice lighter look at the world. Now, that's not to say that this book is a uh, is all about fun because it really isn't. It deals with some real issues.
Mm.
Uh, what I'm trying to do is appeal to the imagination of a younger audience, and what I want a younger audience to come away with, and even though it's, to come away with the idea the story shows respect for different viewpoints, that for the viewpoint of people who hold power, the viewpoint of people who do not, and showing how they might see each other's perspectives. I think you can find that in the story.
Mm-hmm.
I've got powerful characters who care for no perspective but their own. I address racial prejudice, gender equality, and I like to think I dealt with these issues, excuse me, subtly, not heavy in a heavy-handed way, because nobody wants to be clubbed over the head. But I think it's the more effective way of communicating principles of justice is to make it easy for people to understand so they see it in a realistic way. It's not just out there in the ether, oh, this is bad, this is good. It's not just like that. It's like, here's why it's bad, here's why it's good. Look at these different points of view, and then you can draw your own conclusion as far as what you think. If readers don't get any of that, and some won't, I mean, especially if you're a really young reader, that's okay as long as they feel they've read an exciting story. And that's the other thing I wanted to present, was an exciting story. I get bored, frankly. I read a lot. I read like every day. And I usually finish a book every couple of weeks. And some of the books I try to read them through, but frankly, I wind up browsing them because they are boring. They've got points and they do some good things, but some of them are really boring. And then some of them are just terrific. One of the ones I really like, well, I probably shouldn't get off too far, and I really like uh, the Deadly Education, that trilogy. I enjoyed that. There's a number I liked, but that's what I try to do. There's some I really like, and some I'm like, here they're missing the mark, at least as far as I'm concerned as a reader.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I mean, I know I grew up reading the Dragonlance books. And so that was my real introduction to fantasy, and still love them today. But as an adult, well, as an old man, rereading them, I'm seeing a lot of the things that I never picked up on as a kid. So, like you said, racial tensions and stuff, and uh, prejudice and other stuff happening, even bringing forward like women's rights and stuff. And it's really neat to look at that and go, okay, I mean, this is giving me something to think about that I didn't realize I was thinking that as a kid. But then you take those lessons as you grow older, and if you can apply that and think, hey, why couldn't this lady, lead this? Or why couldn't somebody, if to take it from one thing, if an elf can join a dwarf, why couldn't a black and a white work together? Different aspects
Exactly.
from that. It's very different, but also it's, I think, what a lot of times fantasy is trying to get across, and you have that in your book as well. So well done.
Well, thanks. And I want to credit um, the prejudiced people in the community that I grew up with giving me the perspective of we're all alike. I lived in the city of St. Louis in the north side when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched my neighborhood change just dramatically because one black family moved in. And within 3, 4 years, the community was it wasn't, I thought, a tight knit community up to that point. I knew my neighbors up and down the street and still can name them. But they left, and they left in a quick fashion. They sold their property for nothing and got out because there was a black family there. And how incredibly stupid was that? Well, my father was not one of those who moved. I wound up going to a high school that was, I'd say, maybe 50-50 white and black when I got there. And by the time I dropped out, it was probably more like 75-25 white and black, mostly black, because the white people were moving out so incredibly quickly. But I stayed in there until my senior year when I dropped out. I stayed there and I watched the kids who were black, who, I was little, I mean, I was a little kid and I was scared. I was actually a year younger than everybody else. And when I started high school, and I was scared because I'd been told all these things. And what I learned was there are some really terrible people. It doesn't matter what color they are. And some of those people were white and some of those people were black. But other than the skin color, they were exactly the same and how horrible some of them could be. And the same was absolutely true for how wonderful some of them could be. Um, that is what I learned. That is what taught me the difference. You can do all the liberal BS about this and that. If you never are with black people, then don't tell me how black people are because you don't know anything. You want the truth, live with them, and then you learn that they're just like anybody else, and we're just like anybody else, and our skin color doesn't make any difference. What's inside of them, how they act toward you, that's all the difference that is made. And that is part of what I hope came out in Wizard War in the way I dealt with elves and humans.
Yeah, and I think so. I think it did. It really brought forth that whole uh, coming together, regardless of your background, regardless of your race or gender or whatever. It's like you come together for a greater theme. And I think some of the greatest stories out there, that's what we do. It's what they preach a lot of times, whether it's Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or you know, uh, uh, Independence Day. It's like, yeah, we got a whole world coming together for a common thing, a common theme, and let's work together. And we can find a way to work through differences. And yeah, I think you did a good job of putting that in your book.
Thanks.
So what's next for you? Do you have some more Wizard War coming?
It's it's in the back of my head. It's not my priority. My priority right now is I'm working on another history book. I mentioned that I did Jesse James in the County of Clay.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm working on now is Old Drum, a true tale of a beloved dog, a U.S. senator, and a community. That's the working title. It's a bit much, but Old Drum is what would stand out, and the rest would be uh, the subtitle. So I started this project in 2018. It was a community project. I was going to do it for the newspaper, and it kept getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And then I had to deal with a change of leadership to the newspaper, then a job change. So I worked on and off on the book for a little while, and I got back to it full time last year. And when I started the book, most community members knew about Drum. I knew about Drum, the dog on the courthouse lawn, right?
Mm-hmm.
but not why the dog was there really.
Right.
And that's when I learned about Vest and what in his speech. And then I thought, okay, well, that's a dog guy, Vest, the dog guy. But then I found out how absurd that would have been to him, I believe. I really do think that because he did so much the community is not aware of. Um, that's what I try to show in this book is he defended a black slave accused of murder. And I did a short story for our group about that. His leadership role in Missouri was he introduced the Articles to secede from the Union. That's what Missouri did.
Mm-hmm.
Then he worked as a Confederate United States Senator. And then after the war, he became a U.S. Senator. And he did several things that I consider important. But I think the number one thing, especially for people who really care about the outdoors, is he was instrumental in saving Yellowstone National Park.
Oh.
Developers had sewn up the key areas. They were going to have the rights to it. And he serendipitously found out about it. He went to a hotel. I don't know where it was. I want to say Dakota. And he was just at this hotel, like moving on, ready to go on the next train ride after having been to Yellowstone. And he started listening to these developers at the next table talking about they had the rights to this land. And they expected to be able to bring hotels into the key area. You know, before he Vest's involvement, well, I'll just finish this story. It's kind of exciting to me what he did. But they had this area sewn up, bring in the railroads, bring in the hotels. We'll take all of these key areas and we're going to make a bundle. Yay, go for us. Except Vest overheard it. So when this all came up in Congress about granting these rights, he stood up and he just blasted the whole thing apart. He destroyed it. And he became an advocate for Yellowstone from then on. One of the things that his work stopped was people going to Yellowstone and slaughtering, I mean, by the thousands, the animals.
Mm-hmm.
They were taking like tree trunks and taking those tree trunks and throwing them into Old Faithful to watch them blow back out.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine that?
Whew.
He stopped that. He wound up helping to get the United States military into Yellowstone Park for 30 years to keep people who shouldn't be there doing things they shouldn't be doing out of the park. Wow, that's pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
So what I try to do with some people or with because Vest has been written about a few times, mostly articles and a few books. But what I haven't seen elsewhere is, like I did with Jesse James, a timeline related to Vest and the Johnson County Courthouse, various important things that went on. So I did a timeline. And then I did, I was on hand covering the effort to make Old Drum the state's historic dog. So I've got the articles and the backgrounds and the actual disputes that were going on in the legislature and the state senate about not naming Old Drum the state dog. It's like hilarious. You would think this was a bam bam no problem. That took 8 years. Can you believe that? Because
wow.
we had a couple of people arguing about it. And then I've also got a section on some of the best quotes that Vest, in my opinion, gave. So and the one other thing I think is important for, especially from people who do research, is I've actually got end notes. And when you look at some of these books, you're like, where'd they get that? So I've end noted everything. So it's taken a long time. And I hope to have this done and ready to go by April.
Oh, wow. That'd be fantastic.
I really don't have much more to do. I've got the book formatted, but I've got a little bitty section that's been a niggler to me. Having to do with the Old Drum plays. I've got the stuff that the community did, but I understand there were a couple of University of Central Missouri plays or supported plays. I'm not sure which. So I've got to get that information, and that's really it to finish this up.
Outstanding. All right. Well, best of luck to you with that, man. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to that coming out. I know there's an audience for that, particularly particularly in this area for sure. And anybody who's lived in this area throughout their lives, they're aware of the old drum dog there at the courthouse, the statue there. And, I remember in fifth grade writing a story about that because I had to do something historical for Missouri, and wasn't living here at that time. I was living in Mexico, Missouri. I was like, oh, nobody knows about that. I'll write about that. So that was fun. I got an A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always like those days.
Yeah, that was fun. So, well, all right. So we're gonna wrap it up here. I have one more question for you. Something different. A little bit of a would you rather. So, uh, would you rather write something that changes your readers' lives? Like they say, this just touched me. This is life changing. I'm going to live by this for the rest of my life, or something that changes your life, like the editor or the publisher came back and said, yeah, we've got 7 figures for you with this book.
Well, 7 figures wouldn't change my life. Money doesn't really, I know this is weird. People say this, money doesn't mean that much to me. I have enough. I'm not rich, but I have enough. So many people live from hand to mouth. I'm not one of those people. So many people can take a vacation every year to someplace cool. I'm not one of those people. So I'm somewhere in between, and I don't mind that. So I'd much rather change the lives of somebody else, hopefully in a good way. That was kind of what Wizard War was about, to get people to open their eyes and look at different things. And that means something to me. Self-aggrandizement doesn't get, I grew up Catholic, right? Self-aggrandizement, that's a sin. That's called the sin of pride. So yeah, I'm not going to do that. The nuns will take a ruler to my hands and beat me. so no, I would never claim that. And it's, in fact, I have no interest in that. But I really do have an interest in I like to make people happy. It's kind of weird, I suppose, but that's the way it is in my life. Let's see, I wrote a short story last week, and I don't know, were you ill last week?
I was, yeah.
Well, I was writing in this case about an author, and in this instance, it kind of reflects me. So let me read this little passage to you. I just clicked on this.
Yeah.
So the author, this is the end of the story. Perhaps today is my day, the day I lift my eyes and turn my life around, bear down, and concentrate on creating a novel that moves people with words they cannot forget, that they will carry in their hearts for the rest of their lives, that their children's children will read not only in the tiled halls of academia, but for personal enlightenment in comfortable chairs in front of hearths where fires burn as brightly as all the stars flung across the firmament, igniting imagination with the doorbell rings. Oh, damn. That's kind of the way it works sometimes, you know?
And that's I can't help but feel a little bit of serendipity that of all the questions that came up on my would you rather list, that this is the one that I picked, and you had just written something like that. So, and I was unaware of. So that's fantastic how things just kind of work in the ether, and sometimes they trickle down and we can tune into it, and other times like it's out like a candle.
Well, I really enjoyed talking with you. I appreciate it. And if there's anything else, let me know.
Will do, Jack. This has been fantastic. Hey, where can people find and follow you to learn more about you?
Well, I don't have a website because, I'm just not all that astute, I suppose. But, if you want to follow me, I have a Facebook page, Musings and Mutterings is what I call it. I could give you the Facebook address, but it's kind of long. The
That's all right.
www.facebook.com.
What I'll do is I'll put a link in the I'll put a
Okay.
link in the show notes for it, so that way people can just click on that and go right to it.
All right. And then if they're interested, they can always email me at jackandgrace@aol.com. Yeah, AOL. I'm still there. Also, if you're interested in book sales, if you want to buy one, it's I'm on Amazon. You can find it there.
Outstanding. All right. Well, Jack, this has been fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I've really loved being back with the show and bringing new authors. But as you know, next week, Jack will be back with a sample chapter from Wizard of War. So until then, take care, everybody.
Thanks, Jason.